Welcome back to the channel, guys. Back with some more Black Myth Wukong benchmarks, and this time I'll be comparing my 7900 XTX system versus my RTX 4090 system using 100% native, which is DLAA, and no frame generation and no ray tracing. Just want to get a 100% native 4K experience. Of course, on the AMD side, all you do is enable FSR3, put the scaling to 100%. And of course, frame gen and RT is also disabled. Everything's at cinematic. So we should get a good idea of the difference between the two systems at native 4K. And this game is insanely demanding. Even the RTX 4090 overclocked cannot achieve 60 FPS with no ray tracing at native 4K. Now, I am using cinematic settings. Some would argue that's probably best used for doing photo mode and taking vanity kind of shoots and things like that. You wouldn't actually play like that. Well, I would say it's not such a massive difference in performance. It's around like 5 FPS difference from going from very high to cinematic. So I would say some people will actually use the cinematic setting providing they can get the performance they want. But the game does look amazing. There are some popping issues, but other than that, I think it's going to be a graphical showpiece for sure. It's going to be right up there with Alan Wake 2, Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, some of the best looking games on PC. I think this one's definitely going to be up there. The game benchmark tool is available to download free on Steam. So these are the results. You get 36 FPS average on the 7900 XTX system and 53 FPS average on the RTX 4090 system. So at 17 FPS difference. Minimums are better with the NVIDIA system as well. All in all, not a bad result. Okay, moving on to some other settings now. Basically the same 4K at 100% scale, so that's DLA again, but this time I'll be enabling frame generation, and of course frame generation is also going to be enabled on the AMD side. And the reason I'm not enabling ray tracing because it's just far too demanding, and I want to see what frame generation actually brings to the table. So if you remember before, I was getting around 36 FPS I believe on the XTX and 53 or close to that on the 4090. So it's brought quite a boost. That's actually almost 30 FPS boost. I know it's not real frames per second, and you know, you may get some perceivable input lag by using this, but from my experience, if you can average around 50 FPS or so with NVIDIA's DLSS, then you should have a pretty good experience even when using frame generation. On the AMD side, I won't know until I get to interact with the game, of course, but they have made steps to make frame generation's latency come down so it's a little bit more responsive. But yep, the RTX 4090 clearly holding over 60 FPS with frame generation on, no RT with cinematic settings, as well as the XTX is kind of dipping every now and then, but it's roughly, I would say it's definitely going to average 60, but it's not going to lock 60. Because the benchmark's quite long, I'll always be cutting it off before the end just to save a bit of time. But the results are in. You can see the 7900 XTX system scoring 66 FPS on average, and the RTX 4090 system scoring 85 FPS on average. So a 19 FPS difference between the two systems. Better minimums this time. Moving on to an additional test, again playing at resolution of 3840 by 2160 with motion blur disabled. This time, however, super resolution will be at 67%, which is the equivalent to DLSS Quality preset. Frame generation on and full ray tracing disabled with the cinematic quality settings. Reason I'm using ray tracing off is the 7900 XTX system really just can't handle that kind of ray tracing load at that resolution. It is interesting to note that the game does say full ray tracing, which would imply it is possibly using path tracing. So that's global illumination, reflections, shadows, and ambient occlusion. And that is a hell of a ray tracing load. So I understand why the AMD side of things are struggling with the ray tracing. I did a quick test with my RTX 3080 and it was slightly faster than my 7900 XTX. So looking at the performance, however, it is kind of the same as the native 4K without frame generation results, around about 13 to 15 FPS difference between the two systems, and comfortably achieving over 60 FPS average. So if you're not a fan of ray tracing and you have either of these cards and you happy to have a DLSS quality preset with no anti-aliasing, I'm pretty sure you'll get a decent minimum FPS and average FPS experience. This is one of the most demanding games I've ever seen though, so hopefully the game runs well. The results are in though, 97 FPS average on the 7900 XTX system and a 112 FPS average on the RTX 4090 system, so that's a difference of 15 FPS, so around about the same as the native 4K results, so no surprise there. And the averages and the minimums are well above 60. Okay guys, the final test now. Again, 3840 by 2160 with no motion blur. This time, DLSS super resolution will be at 50%, basically giving you a DLSS performance profile. And I'll be using cinematic settings with ray tracing enabled this time. There's a reason I held off using ray tracing up until using this type of resolution. The reason being that the 7900 XTX really struggles in this game, and pretty much this is the only setting that is playable with the full ray tracing enabled. It is pretty much a 3x difference between the two systems here, which is staggering. But I don't just want to talk about performance. If you actually look at the visual differences, it is clearly showing that the NVIDIA GPU is doing the ray tracing more accurately, which is strange to see. If you look at these two rocks, that rock is bathed in shadow, whereas on the AMD side it's not. There's plenty of examples I'm going to point out. I wish I could put my cursor on the screen to kind of further highlight what I'm talking about, but I'll try to be as descriptive as possible. If you look at the tree stump, there's way more shadow with the trees leaves. Look at the actual fallen log as well. That was completely bathed in darkness on the NVIDIA side. Look at the tree shadows again with the leaves on the NVIDIA side. Barely any shadows on the AMD side, which is strange to see. They're both using the same settings, but the actual difference in shadow, look, if you look under this arch here, more shadows on the NVIDIA side where it's pretty much bathed in light on the AMD side. So it's not doing it very accurately. Again, loads of shadows from the trees, hardly any shadows on the AMD side. I don't need to say anything more, just look at the difference for yourself. It's crazy to see. Now maybe AMD need to bring out a driver to correct a few things, but it's staggering to me that not only is the card doing 3x the performance, it actually looks better while doing it. So that is a major concern for the optimization of this game on the AMD side. Hopefully they can get that fixed before the game fully releases on the 20th of August. But yeah, I thought I'd let the benchmark run in its entirety just to highlight that. But as you can see, 33 FPS average FPS on the 7900 XTX and 109 FPS on the RTX 4090 system. So that is over 3x in performance. But before you get too impressed with the results. I'll remind you there is a massive difference in the price between these two cards. At least here in England, United Kingdom, you can get the 7900 XTX Nitro Plus for basically £1,000 and £1,800 for the RTX 4090. So almost double the price, £800 difference between the two cards. So you got to ask yourself, is it really worth it to get that kind of performance? So that is pretty much it for me, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. And as always, thanks for watching.